Well, hello.
Hi, David. Always
Well,
great to see you.
you as well. Welcome to the first episode of Humanist in Residence, where the interviewer changes each time and the interviewee is consistent. You.
Thank you. I am astonished and delighted and grateful. Thank you.
Wonderful. And we are grateful too. I'll begin with your permission, the first episode, which is titled On Becoming an Octogenarian.
Yeah. Wow. Um, why did you pick that, if I may ask?
Uh,
Actually, yeah, okay. Why'd you pick that?
I thought it would be celebratory of the occasion on which the Humanist in Residence was born.
Good. Thank you.
Great. All right. May I begin with a question?
Please.
Excellent. So, how does it feel to say the words, I'm 80?
I've been thinking about this. I was thinking about it just because it was happening and it's, a magic number the way people work in our culture. And then once I knew that you were going to be doing this, I thought, and I've come up with a reply. Um, when I something, not a lot of things didn't change. Most things didn't change. I mean, loads of things have changed in my life. The day you were born, I became a father for the rest of my life, and it felt different from knowing that someday I might be a father. Um, we can have knowledge in many different ways. Um, as with, I could be a father. And I have said to you, for example, that because I'm a vegetarian, I don't ever eat a meal that's not kosher. But if someone were to ask me, am I kosher? My answer is no, because I don't know kashrut in that sense of it being a part of my life that I follow but I am a vegetarian. And it's a different kind of knowledge. Nothing has happened between the day before my birthday and now that changes my knowledge of being an octogenarian. But there is something of how I know it. And the thing that I think that I know the most differently and most powerfully is knowledge that I've had, ever since I was a child, and that is that life is finite. Um, I grew up in a time of many, many medical and other technological advances. When I was 10 years old, living in Brooklyn, a block and a half away from my elementary school, I would walk down McDonald Avenue on a weekend, late morning, early afternoon. I'd see these heavy set guys in t-shirts and sweatshirts with their arms torn off. And picturing them in my mind now, they were probably in their 40s, but they all looked like, they were men. And they were no longer lithe youngsters. They were trying to just get a little sport in on the weekend, and the rest of their life was something else. And they were middle-aged. And people like my grandparents, who, as you know, the youngest of whom was only 40 years my senior. So when I was 20, she was only 60. But my grandparents were old. They acted old, they looked old. But I grew up in a time when that kept changing. People would say 50 is the new 40 or 60 is the, So, and it's true. I mean, I don't see those men anymore driving around. Past schools, you don't see that. People are taking better care of themselves in the world that I see. I realize that the mortality age in the United States astonishingly has actually gone down in the last decade, but it's different to be old. When I was growing up and starting to get really interested in vocabulary, octogenarian wasn't someone who's 81. Octogenarian defined a stage of life the way middle age defined a stage of life. And the thing about octogenarian is it meant old. 80 is not the new 70. People don't say that, or maybe they do with the numbers, but being an octogenarian means you are officially old.
Hmm.
And living, and it feels that way because that's what the word has always meant to me. I mean, you didn't ask, what does it feel like to have your 80th birthday? You asked, your title was On Becoming an Octogenarian. And that's a word that has a lot of freight for my
Hmm.
whole life. And that freight hasn't changed. I think words do that. When we lived in Madrid, you remember we had a balcony that overlooked the M30, which was, the main north-south highway, the only north-south highway out of Madrid in those days. And remember, the Spaniards drove, it was crazy. It was a four-lane highway and it often had 7 lanes worth of traffic in and out and so on. And I asked our neighbor once, well, what do you call that traffic? He didn't speak English, you remember, and he said, apretado, squashed together, I guess would be a good pressed together a good English translation, which of course we would never say of traffic in the United States. It's pressed together. We'd say it's congested, but of course that's what noses do. And even though I grew up in New York City, I didn't grow up watching a highway. But every darn day, if I would sit out on the balcony for a bit, I would see tráfico apretado. And I found when I came back to the United States, going back to Ann Arbor, which is not a huge traffic town, anytime it got really trafficy, rush hour grid for 8 minutes, um, the word that came to mind was apretado. It wasn't congested. That word populated my understanding of a certain condition. The way I feel octogenarian, rather than the way I know the word, is this means you're old, but I don't feel old. So what's the difference between that and when I was 79? And when I was 79, it was easy to say 70 is the new 60. And yes, I retired at 69, but I have friends here in Winchester Gardens um, who are still holding down jobs. I had dinner the other night with a guy who still is working, honest to God, in his early 80s, full time in a bank.
Huh.
Easy job for him at this stage. And he only goes into the office 1 day a week, but he feels like it. And they said, but I think this year will be my last. So what does it mean to be old? I will only enumerate things if you ask, but you know that I'm involved in all kinds of activities that are like the things that I've always done professionally, having to do with literature and technology and language and teaching. And um, I don't feel old at all. But what I do see, because of the time I spend every day with people who are here or I'm seeing by Zoom, what I feel is that life is finite. I
Hmm.
always, I always knew it was finite, but you don't act on that. Everybody knows when they get married that about 50% of all marriages end in divorce. I think very few people say, okay, I'm going to try out marriage and see how it works. If you get married, you think, okay, I know this, but it's not a felt reality for me. I know that life is finite. I always have. But in doing this with you, I'm thinking, if this works out, it'd be wonderful for all of the eight of you who conspired to do this, um, if you so choose, to take a look at it. And maybe in however long it is until I go, you'll take a look at it again when I'm not here. But a part of me, immediately as you were showing me this, thought, and those great grandchildren whom I probably will never meet, they might have a chance to see this because I need to think about them now because I can't just wait and think about them later. It's the finitude of life. I knew it, but now I know it in a different way. The way I I knew fatherhood in a different way. The way, man, I could give you numerous examples. Am I making that clear?
Very much so. Very much so. It's really interesting that you thought of the term octogenarian, or that it was thought of as a phase or a chapter. I hadn't realized that, at least not consciously. I just happened to know that word, which maybe I know because it's in the zeitgeist, but I also know septuagenarian. Um, uh, and so I wonder, since it doesn't feel that way now that you've arrived, does it feel like you're in a chapter?
Honestly, I feel like I'm in the next to last chapter. I don't know that that will be the case. As you know, and as anyone who's likely to see this conversation knows, I had a stroke in 2012. So I'm in June of 2012. So I'm closing in on 14 years post-stroke. Obviously, no significant residual deficits, but I could, even though I'm trying to take care of myself, I understand as a statistical reality, I could become radically changed or finished in a moment. That's what happened the first time. It was just in a moment. But assuming that's not the case, right now, I'm still capable of doing most of the things for which I get the most pleasure. Fortunately, skydiving isn't one of them. um, and using my body radically isn't one of them, but I can exercise, I can go for walks, I can hold my wife's hand, I can give you a hug, um, and I can hold up a book and I can read and I can speak and I can learn new things and I can impart them and share them. And I don't feel any actual diminution in that. There was a time about 3 months ago that I had an actual blank. I thought of someone I know. I could see this person's face, and her name was not on the tip of my tongue. It's the first time that has ever happened to me. It may be a foretaste of Alzheimer's or who knows what, because I live among people, virtually all of whom talk about one kind or another of memory loss. The things that I most love to do need good memory. And once this happened, so much so that I wrote it in my calendar so that if it ever happens again, I'll mark it and I'll want to track how fast it progresses if it does. Just once, ever.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm very lucky. Inside myself, I feel young, which is why I think this is a chapter. I mean, it's an important chapter. When we moved to Winchester Gardens, it was with the intellectual understanding that this was, in all likelihood, the last place I will ever live. Not necessarily in this apartment, it may be in the health center, but I'm never going to leave Winchester Gardens in all likelihood. I no longer am a homeowner. It's just But this current 80-year guy in his 80s is among those like the banker friend of mine. This is my chapter. I'm doing it here, and I hope to continue this chapter. But I see it with all kinds of people around me, some of whom you know. And if I don't have that stroke, the odds are good there will be yet one more chapter. And that's going to be hard to navigate. That's going to be hard. I know because I see people doing it every day.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's why it says, I feel like a new chapter. Yes, I am 80. I am officially old, but I'm still inside me young. But
Yeah.
I don't, I, but I learned the lesson in a new way about the finitude of life. I do not expect to be young indefinitely, you know.
Yeah. Well, what one of the, this is not exactly where I anticipated it going in a wonderful way. Um, Let me take a little bit of a pivot and to look backward instead of forward. One learns, and I think you especially learn at each new stage and phase, and I think almost every day. Uh, if you had to look back at your 55-year-old self and share some wisdom that you've learned now that might have been a surprise uh, to you at 55. What might you tell that person?
Wow. The first thing I want to say is this is, in some sense, a public conversation we're having. And some of the things that I might say to you if we were having this conversation privately, truly privately, I won't say here because I'm not the only one involved. And in fact, you and the other members of my close family are the ones who are most involved in all of what was going on when I was my 55-year-old self. Um, I'm not trying to duck the question. Um, I will say this, though. One thing that I would say to the 55-year-old self, without going into detail, is those people who say, if you're looking at, you're weighing options, just remember it's the things you don't do that you regret. So go for it. I haven't done a lot of things that I regret, but I think that blanket observation is crap. It's selfish. It's selfish crap. It justifies somebody doing something without concern for the consequences for the people around the individual, for his own sense of himself later in life. So I would say, in fact, if you see a chance to do something that you think is good, important, worthwhile, don't let the minutia of life stop you. But that general rule, you know, do it. Otherwise, that's what you'll regret. That's wrong. I would have told myself that earlier, and I hope I would have believed it.
Mm,
And then there's another one, which I have learned. I learned the lesson once many years ago, and I've learned it in an even deeper way now. Again, I'm talking about the nature of learning. And it and I long ago captured it in the V and my mantra that I meditate with and cobwebs, and the V stands for value people. One of the consequences of valuing people that I had not appreciated when I began to build that system was patience based on a recognition that for most of the people I deal with, most of the time, anything that they do or don't do that I wish were otherwise, it's because they're just doing the best they can. And I have come to feel that in so deep a way that in most circumstances now, I find, I mean, it's silly to say, I kind of feel like Buddha. I mean, my patience is almost limitless. Um, I don't mean that I'll just sit there and let somebody blather at me, for example. So along with that goes other things. Like, one of the B in cobwebs is be direct. But instead of saying to the blatherer, will you shut up? Instead of feeling angry, I just, I realize the person is doing what that person needs to do. And I'll just say, I'm sorry that I can't stay any longer, but I need to go do something and do it. And just no anger, no, just if I could have learned a fundamental patience based on a recognition of people doing what they need to do, um, that would have helped. I think I understood some of it, that the empty boat thing from Chuang-Tzu that I've told you about, that means so much to me. That has that in there too, about the not feeling the anger, but it doesn't have that about the patience. And I think other people aren't made happier by the fact that they don't see the people around them getting angry. But I think other people do get their lives better if they see the other people around them being accepting. And patience means, okay, I'll keep listening.
That's fair. That's wonderful. Do you have a sense that that learning is a natural consequence of getting older and observing, whether it's correlated or causal or partial? Clearly, it doesn't always happen. And or do you think that comes from time meditating?
Well, I certainly know that time meditating has been very valuable to me in coming to many realizations. And the fact that two of them of that seven set came up in just this last bit suggests, yeah, this is something that began long ago, and maybe I'm deepening or modifying my understanding of it now. I do believe, though, that there is at least a causation, excuse me, a correlation with age. And I think that for many people, it's causative as well. The reason that it's causative is that they need to understand that they are not independent agents. I got a message today from a man whom I have known for many years, and I've known him in part as a member of a book club that still meets via Zoom, though I no longer live in Ann Arbor, where I joined that book club in 2001. So it's over a quarter of a century that I knew him longer, but over a quarter of a century that I've seen him more or less on a monthly basis for, if for nothing else than this. And this is a book club where each person is assigned the leadership of the discussion for a different book. And he wrote in and said, this is after a series of other messages, he can't lead the book he was assigned. And he has come to realize that it's not the book. he just can't take that responsibility in the conversation anymore, but he'd still like to be able to participate in the conversation.
Hmm.
I really admire his ability to write that message. I I deeply admire it. He is recognizing the reality of his life, and he is recognizing that the best life he can have requires the cooperation of other people, and he's willing to ask for it. That's amazing. And it seems to me that that's the kind of thing, the recognition of the importance of other people and our reliance on them. That's part of what builds that patience that I was talking about and that I think you were asking about. But while it is causative for those for whom it works, it's only correlative for lots of other people because there are other people, and I know some of them around here who just get angrier and angrier. Why? I don't want to live like this, but I know people I have known for years now here because I've been in Winchester Gardens 3.5 years. I've known people who have never had a meal and said, "Oh, this is pretty good."
Hmm.
I've asked them when they've said nothing, "Well, what do you think of the chicken or the fish or whatever?" And they've said, "Edible." They have taken a different lesson from the changes of their body and the limitations of their independence. So I hadn't thought of this before, but I don't know if you had taken me at 22, at 20, and dropped me here, now would I develop these things? I don't know if it's the meditation. I don't know if it's my mindset that I grew up. But yes, becoming an octogenarian has made me aware of and cherish some of these characteristics, not only in myself, but in others. And meditation has been part of my becoming who I am now. You have been part of, I mean, our conversations have always meant so much to me. Um, and for those who may look at this, that doesn't exclude the other people in this project. Um, but I know that some people, it doesn't work. It becomes bad.
Yeah. Let me shift gears a little bit. Teaching has always been an enormous part of how you spend your time, at least since I came on the scene. And wonderfully, it continues to be a big part of how you spend your time, and certainly a big part of the influence that you have on so many people. How has teaching for you changed over the years?
You mean formal teaching, the kind where I have an assigned student and I get a paycheck?
Both formal and informal.
Well, formal teaching has changed um, in that it has loosened up until the current administration. I'm not talking about the Trump years. I don't know what's going to happen as academic freedom becomes trammeled and as political rather than intellectual goals seem to be driving the policy toward higher education, which is the education level that I would informally, I mean, yeah. But up until that, there have been um, changes that I would say were liberating. Um, when I went to school as an English major, you got to take courses in Shakespeare or Milton, right? people can say whatever they want about we've gone too far in changing the canon. But the fact is that starting in the 1970s, I was able to say to my institution, I think we should look at genres and how they develop, not just pick out great writers. I think we should look at a spectrum of different things that may affect how people understand. I think, um, and it was possible. I was speaking to a man just yesterday who went, in fact, to Harvard, a very good school, one of your alma maters. And he said he couldn't do what he wanted to. So he got his undergraduate degree, did well, took what courses he could toward what he wanted to do, and then he had to get two different master's degrees to put together the skill set that he wanted to be able to move forward in life. Because he said when he went there, and he's somewhat younger than I am, so it was even later than when I went to school, you couldn't define your own major. I don't know what it's like at Harvard now, but I know that already in the 1970s at Michigan, we had something called the individually defined concentration. And you would go to somebody who was the major advisor for the department in which you would take the plurality of your courses and lay out a rationale for why you wanted to do what you wanted to do. And it went before the curriculum committee of the college. And if it got approved, that was your major. This idea that things could just liberate us. I founded courses, as you know, in science fiction. I had the second science fiction course at the college level in the country. I had a course in fantasy. I taught a lab course called Technology in the Humanities, which went on for a decade and a half. And nobody batted an eye. They would have when I went to college. But by the time I was doing these things, as long as you could come up with a good idea, there were ways to do it. And there were students who wanted it. So that was great. The downside of that, of course, is you got to watch your mouth. I sometimes used, I've told you this anecdote before, but I'll do it now for the record, I guess. Sometimes I had big lecture classes, and sometimes the structure of jokes was useful in making a point about narratology. So I was going to tell a joke, and then, but you can't tell a blonde joke, and you can't tell a Polish joke, and you can't tell a Jewish American princess. I mean, you can't, because the reality is somebody is going to be offended, and why bother? Find a different example. So I'm standing up on the stage, and I say to tell us that, for example, consider this. There was this Scientologist, and it's 300 kids in the room. Somebody from the back of the room yells out, "Watch yourself, Rabkin." When I went to college, nobody would ever interrupt the lecturer for any reason whatsoever. So it's terrific that things got more liberated, that more technologies got involved, that more available materials became valid objects of consideration and production by students and their teachers. But it also led to an environment that's trickier to navigate, even if you have the best will in the world. On the informal level, it turns out that people come to me much more often from the science side of my background than the language side. I mean, people talk about language all the time, and they know that I'm good at that. But people are always saying, can you make my cell phone work? How come I can't sign on? I mean, but that's because I live among octogenarians.
As you think about who you are and about what society is there something, and it could be one or the other, it could be something that's overlapping. Is there something that you'd look back from your childhood all the way through now and say, that hasn't really changed.
Wow. I'm assuming that you're asking about human beings, not the third law of thermodynamics. Um, those things haven't changed. Um, I think that the hunger for connection, the desire to teach and learn, and appreciation of our bodies in the world, maybe walking down a city street, but certainly lying and hearing the waves come in and out. I think those things haven't changed. How we make our connections, that's tough. A world mediated by screens. Um, but I think the desire for connection and the desire to teach and learn, I think those haven't changed. I don't like just for me. I can think of lots of things that haven't changed for me. But as I look at the world around, I think
Hmm.
those things have persisted.
Yeah. What are a couple of things that haven't changed for you?
The crucial importance of family, um, my gratitude for being able to participate in the long heritage of Judaism without having to myself be a religiously observant person. Um, that wouldn't be true if I lived in if I'd been born into an Orthodox family, that wouldn't be the case. But I have always lived in a time and a place where it was okay to be a secular Jew. And in fact, it was terrific to be a secular Jew. I realized that on the international stage, that is much more problematic than it was before. But you ask what for me, and I still feel that gratitude for having that as my heritage. Um, Love of a good woman.
Hmm.
I can't tell you how much your mother means to me more every day. But we've only been married for 58 years, so check in with me in a decade.
I will. Uh, I have a couple of other questions, but I'm looking at the clock and I wanted to make sure I left time for you to share thoughts that you perhaps had in advance of this conversation. Anything you might want to just share for posterity on this topic.
When anybody gives you their attention openly, it's a gift. Um, for the 8 of you who concocted this, for the 2 of you who are the strongest drivers, and for anybody else who, for some reason, is curious enough to listen hereafter, I want to thank you. When I was a kid, I thought, Woody Allen's famous line, I don't want to achieve immortality through my children. I want to achieve more immortality by not dying. And I knew I wasn't going to not die, but I thought, but books meant so much to me. It was amazing. But then I realized, we still have Plato, but there's all those people between Plato and Shakespeare we've never heard of. So you write a book and but in 100 years, nobody's going to read almost any book that was written now, probably including mine. But if people pay attention, if they care, then that's as much as you can, as a human being has any right to ask for knowing that he didn't just take up space and use up resources, that he had a contribution because other people want that person for some reason. And that's what you guys have been in your whole lives. I mean, from birth on, you've wanted things and been glad when your mom and I, or sometimes just me, sometimes just her, could provide them. And so my thought is thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. This was a wonderful first episode. I'm excited to have it in the can, and we're delighted that you agreed to this position of humanist in residence, and thank you for a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, David.